The morning alarm buzzed through the metal corridors of Galactic Survey Station Kepler 442b. Captain Hyun-sik rolled out of his narrow bunk and rubbed his tired eyes. 3 months in space had left him longing for real sunlight and fresh air. He dressed in his standard-issue gray uniform and walked toward the command center. The station hummed with activity. Alien crew members moved through the halls with purpose. The tall blue Trilaxians clicked their mandibles as they discussed star charts. Short, stocky Vorthak warriors stomped past in their heavy boots. Even the peaceful Keth Mori floated by in their environmental suits. Hyun-sik entered the command center, where holographic displays showed dozens of star systems. Commander Dae-ho stood at the center console. The Altarian commander was twice as tall as any human. His blue-green scales caught the artificial light as he turned toward Hyun-sik. "Captain," Dae-ho said in his deep voice, "we have a problem." Hyun-sik approached the main display. It showed a green and brown moon orbiting a distant planet. "What kind of problem, Commander?" Dae-ho pressed several buttons. The display zoomed in on the moon's surface. Dense jungle covered every visible inch of land. "This is Verdania Prime's largest moon. We discovered it 3 weeks ago, rich in rare minerals and perfect for colonization." "Looks peaceful enough," Hyun-sik said. Dae-ho made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. 3 exploration teams have entered that jungle. None have returned. The display changed to show mission records. First came the Trilaxian Scout Team, 5 experienced explorers with advanced scanning equipment. They had landed safely and sent regular reports for 6 hours. Then silence. "Maybe equipment failure," Hyun-sik suggested. "That's what we thought," Dae-ho replied. "So we sent the Vorthak." The second mission record appeared. 8 Vorthak warriors, in full combat armor. They carried energy weapons and heavy protective gear. Their final transmission came 12 hours after landing. The audio was filled with strange sounds and panicked voices. "The Vorthak don't panic easily," Hyun-sik observed. "No, they don't," Dae-ho agreed, "which is why we sent our best." The third record showed the Keth Mori expedition. These beings were known throughout the galaxy as the finest scouts and trackers. They could survive in any environment. Their advanced technology allowed them to become nearly invisible. "How long did they last?" Hyun-sik asked. 18 hours. Their last message was disturbing. Dae-ho played the audio. Strange music seemed to drift through static. Underneath were voices speaking in the Keth Mori language. The universal translator struggled with the words. "They said the jungle was singing to them," Dae-ho explained. "They said the trees were watching." Hyun-sik studied the mission data. Each team had used different approaches. The Trilaxians relied on technology and careful planning. The Vorthak trusted their weapons and armor. The Keth Mori used stealth and advanced scouting methods. All had failed. "So why are you telling me this?" Hyun-sik asked. Dae-ho's scales shifted color slightly. Among Altarians, this showed embarrassment or discomfort. "The Federation Council wants to try a different approach." "Different how?" "They want to send humans." Hyun-sik felt his stomach drop. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Federation. Most alien species still saw them as primitive. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Many aliens questioned whether humans belonged in space at all. "You think we'll succeed where others failed?" Hyun-sik asked. Dae-ho turned away from the display. "Honestly? No. But the Council wants to explore every option before declaring the moon off limits." The truth hit Hyun-sik like a physical blow. This wasn't a real mission. It was a death sentence disguised as an assignment. The Federation expected the humans to die. They just wanted to be thorough about it. "Who else knows about this?" Hyun-sik asked. "Your team, if you accept. Lieutenant Jin Woo, Sergeant Yoon Ah, and Private Min Ho." Hyun-sik knew all 3 humans well. Jin-Woo had served in Earth's military before joining the Federation. He had survived in some of the harshest places on Earth. Yun-Ah was a brilliant botanist who had joined the military scout division. Minho was young but had an unusual gift for understanding alien behavior. "What equipment will we have?" Hyun-sik asked. Dae-ho gestured to another display. It showed standard survival gear. Basic food rations, simple tools, primitive weapons. Nothing like the advanced technology the other teams had carried. "The Federation believes technology might be part of the problem," Dae-ho explained. "Each team relied heavily on their equipment. Maybe a simpler approach will work better." Hyun-sik almost laughed. The Federation wasn't being clever. They were being cheap. Why waste expensive equipment on a mission they expected to fail? "When do we leave?" he asked. "You haven't accepted yet." Hyun-sik looked at the jungle moon rotating slowly on the display. Something about it bothered him. Not the danger, though. That was real enough. Something else. The other teams had approached it like a problem to solve or an enemy to defeat. Maybe that was the mistake. "I need to talk to my team first." "Of course. You have 2 hours to decide." Hyun-sik left the command center and walked through the station corridors. Other crew members avoided his eyes. Word traveled fast on a space station. Everyone already knew about the mission. They were probably placing bets on how long the humans would survive. He found Jin-Woo in the training center, practicing with a combat knife. The lieutenant was a few years older than Hyun-sik, with graying hair and steady hands. "Heard we got picked for something special," Jin-Woo said without looking up. "You could call it that." Jin-Woo finished his practice routine and set down the knife. 3 teams went in. None came out. Now they want to try the humans." "That's about right." Jin-Woo nodded slowly. "Sounds like they expect us to fail." "Probably." "Good. I've always done my best work when no one expected me to succeed." They found Yuna in the hydroponics bay, tending to the food plants that fed the station. She looked up when they entered, her intelligent eyes already knowing why they had come. "The jungle moon?" she asked. "How did you know?" Hyun-sik asked. "I've been studying the mission reports. The plant life down there is unlike anything we've cataloged. The other teams treated it like an obstacle. Maybe they should have treated it like an ecosystem." Minho was in communications, monitoring signals from across the sector. At 19, he was the youngest member of their group, but he had already earned respect for his ability to understand alien cultures. "The Keth Mori said the jungle was singing," he said when they found him. "That doesn't sound like random noise to me. That sounds like communication." The 4 humans stood in the empty corridor outside communications. Around them, the station continued its routine operations. Aliens went about their duties, probably already writing off the human team as casualties. "So?" Hyun-sik asked. "Do we take the mission?" Jin-Woo checked his equipment list again. "Basic gear, primitive tools. They're not expecting us to fight our way out." "Maybe fighting isn't the answer," Yun-ah suggested. Minho nodded. "The other teams went in expecting to conquer. Maybe we should go in expecting to learn." Hyun-sik looked at each member of his team. They were young by military standards, inexperienced compared to the alien warriors who had failed before them. But they had something the others might have lacked. They had nothing to prove except to themselves. "All right," he said. "Let's go see what killed 3 elite teams." 2 hours later, they stood in Commander Dae-ho's office again. The Altarian. Commander looked surprised when they accepted the mission. He had probably expected them to decline. "You understand this is extremely dangerous?" Dae-ho asked. "We understand," Hyun-sik replied. "And you know that 3 highly trained teams have already failed?" "We know." Dae-ho's scales shifted color again. This time it might have been respect or pity. "Very well. You depart in 6 hours. May your ancestors guide you." As they left the commander's office, Hyun-sik caught a glimpse of the jungle moon, On the display screen, soon they would be walking under those dense green canopies. They would breathe that alien air and drink that alien water. They would either solve the mystery that had claimed 3 teams or become part of it themselves. But for the first time since hearing about the mission, Hyun-sik felt something other than dread. He felt curious. And in a galaxy full of species who solved problems with superior technology or overwhelming force, maybe curiosity was exactly what they needed. The drop pod shook violently as it fell through Verdania's thick atmosphere. Captain Hyun-sik gripped his safety harness and watched through the small window as they descended toward the jungle moon's surface. The green canopy below looked peaceful from this height, but he knew better. 30 seconds to impact, Jinwoo called out from the pilot's seat. The pod's heat shields glowed red as they cut through the dense air. Strange flying creatures scattered from their path. Some looked like birds, others like floating jellyfish with rainbow colors. All of them fled from the falling human craft. 20 seconds, Jinwoo announced. Yuna checked her botanical equipment one more time. Simple tools mostly. A basic scanner, sample containers, and a notebook. Nothing like the advanced gear the other teams had carried. Remember, we treat everything as potentially alive until proven otherwise. 10 seconds, Jinwoo said. Everyone hold on. The pod crashed through the jungle canopy with tremendous noise. Branches cracked and leaves exploded around them. They hit 3 different tree levels before finally slamming into the soft ground with a bone-jarring impact. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sounds were settling metal and their own heavy breathing. Everyone alive? Hyun-sik asked. Still. Here, Minho replied, checking his simple communication gear. Same, Yuna said, though her voice sounded shaky. Jinwoo worked the pod's release mechanism. Door's jammed, give me a minute. While Jinwoo struggled with the door, the others looked out through the pod's small windows. The jungle pressed close on all sides. Massive trees stretched up beyond their vision, their trunks wider than buildings. Vines hung down like natural ropes, some as thick as a human waist. Everything moved slightly in a warm breeze that carried strange scents. Sweet flowers mixed with rotting vegetation and something else. Something alive and watchful. Got it, Jinwoo said as the door finally opened. The first thing that hit them was the humidity. It wrapped around them like a wet blanket, making their uniforms stick to their skin immediately. The air was thick enough to chew, filled with floating spores and tiny insects. Hyun-sik stepped out first, his boots sinking slightly into the spongy ground. The soil here wasn't like earth dirt. It felt alive, shifting and responding to pressure. Small lights flickered beneath the surface with each step. Careful where you walk, Yuna warned, kneeling to examine the ground. This isn't normal soil, it's some kind of living network. Jinwoo emerged carrying their basic supplies. 3 packs with food for a week, water purification tablets, simple tools, and emergency medical supplies. No energy weapons, no advanced scanners, no long-range communicators. Communications are down, Minho reported, fiddling with their radio. Something in the air is interfering with the signal. As if responding to his words, a shower of golden spores drifted down from the canopy above. They sparkled in the filtered sunlight before settling on everything around them. Where the spores touched their electronic equipment, small sparks flickered and died. There goes our backup communicator, Minho said, watching his secondary radio smoke and go silent. Yuna caught some of the spores in a sample container. Under her basic magnifier, they looked like tiny golden flowers with moving parts inside. These aren't just spores. They're some kind of biological mechanism. They're designed to disable technology. The implication hit them all at once. The jungle was actively fighting back against advanced equipment. No wonder the other teams had failed. Their high-tech gear had made them targets from the moment they arrived. So what do we do? Minho asked. Jinwoo shouldered his pack and looked, around at the towering trees. We do what humans did for thousands of years before we had fancy equipment. We use our eyes, ears, and brains. They began walking deeper into the jungle, following what might have been a natural path. The ground remained soft and responsive under their feet. Occasionally, bioluminescent patches would flicker to life as they passed, creating brief trails of blue and green light. The jungle was impossibly alive. Every surface crawled with insects, small lizard-like creatures, and things that defied easy description. Flowers the size of dinner plates turned to follow their movement. Vines swayed without any wind to move them. "Look at that," Yuna whispered, pointing to a massive plant ahead of them. It looked like a Venus flytrap, but enormous. Its jaw-like opening was wide enough to swallow a small vehicle. Rows of thorn-like teeth lined the edges, and a sweet smell drifted from its depths. "The Trilaxian reports mentioned carnivorous plants," Hyun-sik said. "They thought the jungle was trying to eat them." Jinwoo studied the giant plant carefully. He picked up a fallen branch and tossed it near the creature. The plant's jaws snapped, shut with tremendous force, easily crushing the wood to splinters. "It's definitely a predator," he said, "but look at how it reacted." They watched as the plant slowly opened its jaws again. The branch was gone, but the plant seemed to taste the air, searching for something specific. "It's not just hunting randomly," Yun-ah observed. "It's looking for particular chemical signatures." Minho knelt down and examined the ground around. The plant. "There are paths here, well-worn tracks that go around it, not toward it. Something intelligent uses this area regularly." They followed the tracks, giving the carnivorous plant a wide berth. The deeper they went into the jungle, the more obvious it became that this wasn't just a collection of dangerous animals and plants. It was a system. Everything here worked together in ways they didn't understand yet. Strange sounds echoed through the canopy above them. Some were clearly animal calls, but others were different, more complex, almost like language. "Are you getting this?" Hyun-sik asked Minho. The young communications specialist had his head tilted, listening intently. "There are patterns in the sounds, repetition and variation. It could be coincidence, but it sounds like communication," Yuna finished. They stopped to rest beside a stream of clear water that bubbled up from underground. Jinwoo tested it with their purification tablets, but the water seemed clean even before treatment. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "Everything we've seen should be contaminated or dangerous, but this water is purer than what we have on the station." Yuna examined the plants growing near the stream. "These are all filter species. They're cleaning the water as it flows past. The whole system is designed to maintain purity." Above them, the jungle canopy filtered the sunlight into green and gold patterns that shifted constantly. Somewhere in that network of branches and leaves, they could hear movement. Not the random sounds of animals, but purposeful activity. "We're being watched," Jinwoo said quietly. "I know," Hyun-sik replied. "Have been since we landed." They continued following the stream, which led them deeper into the jungle's heart. The trees grew even larger here, their trunks disappearing into the misty canopy high above. Bioluminescent fungi provided patches of blue and purple light in the perpetual twilight of the forest floor. "Captain," Minho said suddenly, "listen." They all stopped walking and stood perfectly still. The jungle sounds continued around them, but underneath was something else. A low humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "It's the trees," Yuna whispered. "They're vibrating at a specific frequency." The humming grew stronger as evening approached. More creatures began to move through the canopy above them. Some glowed with their own light, creating a living constellation in the darkness. "We need shelter," Jinwoo said practically. They found a clearing beside the stream where the massive trees formed a natural circle. The ground here was covered in soft moss that glowed faintly when touched. It seemed like the safest place had seen all day. As they set up their simple camp using tarps and rope instead of high-tech shelters, the jungle around them came fully alive. Night brought out creatures that painted the darkness with living light. The humming grew louder, almost musical. The other teams probably tried to fight this, Yun-sik observed, watching the light show above them. Or hide from it, Jin-woo added. Yuna sat cross-legged on the glowing moss, making notes in her notebook by the light of bioluminescent fungi. What if we tried something different? Like what? Minho asked. What if we tried to join the conversation instead of fighting it or hiding from it? The jungle sounds swirled around them as they considered her words. Somewhere in the distance, something large moved through the trees. Not toward them, but parallel to their position. Keeping pace, but maintaining distance. Tomorrow, Yun-sik decided. Tonight, we rest and observe. Tomorrow, we see if this place wants to talk to us. As the four humans settled down to sleep in the heart of an alien jungle, surrounded by dangers that had destroyed 3 elite teams, they felt something the others might have missed. They felt welcome. The jungle hummed its ancient songs around them, and for the first time since landing, they began to understand that they weren't in a hostile environment. They were in a living one, and it was curious about them too. Dawn came slowly through the jungle canopy. Captain Hyun-sik woke to the sound of water trickling and strange bird songs echoing from high above. The moss beneath him still glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He sat up carefully, not wanting to disturb whatever magic had kept them safe through the night. The others were already awake. Jin-woo sat by the stream, watching the water flow past. Yuna knelt beside a cluster of flowers that hadn't been there the night before. Minho stood at the edge of their clearing, his head tilted as he listened to the jungle sounds. "Did you sleep?" Hyun-sik asked Jin-woo. "Some. Had visitors during the night. They didn't come close, just watched from the trees." "Hostile?" "Curious, I think. Like they were trying to figure out what we were." Yuna looked up from the flowers she was examining. "These grew overnight, right around our camp. They're some kind of morning glory, but the pollen has antibiotic properties." "The jungle gave us medicine while we slept?" Hyun-sik asked. "Maybe. Or maybe it's testing us to see how we react to gifts." Minho turned back toward them, excitement clear on his young face. "I've been listening to the sounds all morning. There are definitely patterns, and I think some of them are responses to things we did yesterday." They gathered around their small supply of food for breakfast, simple rations that tasted like cardboard, but the stream provided clean water and the jungle offered fruits that Yuna carefully tested before declaring safe. "So what's the plan?" Jin-woo asked. Before Hyun-sik could answer, the jungle around them fell silent. No bird songs, no insect buzzing, no rustling leaves. Even the stream seemed to flow more quietly. "Something's coming," Jin-woo whispered, his hand moving instinctively toward his simple knife. "Wait," Minho said softly. "Listen." Footsteps approached, through the undergrowth, not the heavy tread of the Vorthak warriors or the mechanical sounds of Trilaxian equipment. These steps were soft, deliberate, almost musical. A figure emerged from between the massive trees. At first glance, it looked like a human covered in living bark. The being stood upright on 2 legs with 2 arms and a recognizable head, but its skin was brown and textured like tree bark, with patches of green that might have been moss or lichen. Its eyes were the color of autumn leaves, shifting between gold and red and brown. "Nobody move suddenly," Hyun-sik said quietly. The creature stopped at the edge of their clearing. It was clearly studying them just as intently as they were studying it. When it spoke, the sound was like wind through branches, mixed with something that might have been words. Minho stepped forward slowly. "I think it's trying to communicate." The being tilted its head and made the sound again. This time, Minho tried to copy it. His attempt was clumsy, but the creature's eyes brightened with what might have been amusement. Yuna slowly reached into her pack and pulled out her water bottle. Moving very carefully, she poured water into her cupped hand and held it out toward the being. The creature stared at the offered water for a long moment. Then it stepped forward and extended its own hand. Its fingers were longer than human fingers, with what looked like small root tendrils at the tips. When the creature touched the water in Yuna's palm, its bark-like skin seemed to shimmer and change color slightly. It made a sound that was definitely different from its first attempts at communication. Warmer, somehow. I think that was thank you, Yuna said softly. The being stepped back and gestured toward itself. It spoke a single word that sounded like wind through bamboo. Wu Jin, Minho repeated slowly. The creature nodded, then pointed at Minho expectantly. Minho, the young man said, pointing to himself. Wu Jin repeated the name, getting the pronunciation almost perfect on the first try. Then it pointed to each of the other humans in turn. Yun-ah, the botanist said. Jin-Wu, said the lieutenant. Hyun-sik, the captain added. Wu Jin repeated each name carefully, as if filing them away for future use. Then it gestured around the clearing and spoke several words in its wind-like language. I think it's asking what we're doing here, Minho said. Jin-Wu slowly pulled out his mission notes and showed them to Wu Jin. The being examined the papers with obvious curiosity, though it probably couldn't read human writing. Hyun-sik had an idea. He knelt down and used a stick to draw simple pictures in the soft ground. First he drew the space station. Then he drew their drop pod falling. Finally, he drew stick figures representing their team. Wu Jin studied the drawings, then added its own marks to the dirt. It drew what looked like 3 other groups, each one being absorbed into larger drawings of trees and vines. The other teams, Yuna whispered. Wu Jin nodded sadly, then drew a line between the human stick figures and itself. It spoke several words that sounded like a question. I think it's asking if we're different from the others, Minho said. How do we show that we are? Jin-Wu asked. Yuna knelt beside the stream and filled her water bottle. Then she offered it to Wu Jin again. When the being drank, she pointed to the bottle and then to herself, making a giving motion. Wu Jin seemed to understand. It walked to a nearby tree and touched its bark. A moment later, a bulge appeared in the trunk. The being carefully extracted what looked like a large fruit and offered it to Yuna. Exchange, Hyun-sik said. It understands trade. For the next hour, they worked on basic communication. Wu Jin taught them words for water, food, tree, and ground. The humans shared their names for the same things. The being was a remarkably quick learner, picking up human sounds much faster than they could master its wind-like language. Eventually, Wu Jin gestured for them to follow. It led them deeper into the jungle, along paths that were invisible until they were walking on them. The being moved through the forest like it was part of it, stepping on certain roots and avoiding others according to rules the humans couldn't see. They walked for several hours, stopping occasionally for Wu Jin to communicate with trees. It would touch a trunk and make soft sounds, and the tree would respond with creaks and rustles. Sometimes fruit would appear. Other times, the path ahead would shift slightly. The trees are talking to it, Yuna observed. Or it's talking to them, Minho added. They reached a grove where the trees grew in a perfect circle. In the center sat an ancient being that was clearly the same species as Wu Jin, but much older. Its bark skin showed the rings of centuries, and moss covered most of its body like a living blanket. Wu Jin spoke to the elder in rapid bursts of wind-like words. The ancient being studied the humans with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. When it finally spoke, its voice was like an entire forest sighing. Gildong, Wu Jin said, gesturing to the elder. Gildong extended one gnarled hand toward Hyun-sik. When the captain took it, images flashed through his mind. He saw the jungle as it really was, not a collection of separate plants and animals, but a single living entity. Every tree, every vine, every insect was part of one vast organism. He saw the fate of the previous teams. The Trilaxians had tried to scan and catalog everything, treating the jungle like a resource to be exploited. The Vorthak had come with weapons, ready to fight anything that challenged them. The Kethmori had tried to hide and sneak through, showing no respect for the forest's awareness. All had been judged and found wanting. The jungle had absorbed their consciousness into itself, adding their knowledge to its vast memory while removing the threat they represented. "Why are we different?" Hyun-sik asked, though he wasn't sure Gildong would understand. The ancient being pointed to the water bottle Yun-ah still carried. Then it pointed to the fruit Wu-jin had given them. Finally, it touched its own chest and then pointed to each human in turn. "Respect?" Yun-ah said suddenly. "It's about respect." Gildong nodded slowly. It spoke again, and this time Minho was able to understand some of the words. "It says the jungle wants to learn about us, the way we learned about it." A younger member of Wu-jin's species appeared from between the trees. This one was smaller, with bark that showed green growing patches and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. "Yunji," Wu-jin said, introducing the newcomer. Yunji approached the humans without fear. It walked right up to Minho and examined his communication equipment with obvious fascination. When Minho showed it how the simple radio worked, even though it was mostly broken, Yunji made excited sounds. "It wants to understand our technology," Minho realized. "And we want to understand theirs," Yun-ah added, watching as Yunji demonstrated how to make a tree produce fruit by touching it in a specific pattern. As the day progressed, more of Wu-jin's people appeared in the grove. They came in small groups, approaching cautiously but with obvious curiosity. The humans were clearly the first outsiders these beings had met who showed interest in learning rather than taking. "We need names for them," Jin Woo said practically, "and they need names for us that make sense in their language." They spent the afternoon working on communication. The beings Hyun-sik mentally called the Silvani taught them basic concepts of jungle life. How to read the mood of trees by their leaf movements. How to find clean water by following certain root patterns. How to identify which fruits were safe and which were meant for other species. In return, the humans shared their own knowledge. They showed the Silvani how their simple tools worked. They demonstrated basic first aid and explained concepts like mathematics and astronomy through drawings in the dirt. By evening, they had established basic trust. The Silvani invited the humans to share their food, fruits and nuts that grew fresh from the trees around them. The humans offered their remaining rations, which the Silvani found strange but interesting. As night fell, and the jungle began its evening song of lights and sounds, Gildong spoke to Wu-jin for a long time. Finally, Wu-jin turned to the humans. Using a mixture of words they had learned and gestures, it managed to communicate a stunning revelation. The other teams weren't dead. They were still here, their consciousness absorbed into the jungle's vast memory. They could be released, but only if the jungle judged the humans worthy of trust. "How do we prove that?" Hyun-sik asked. Wu-jin pointed deeper into the jungle, toward the heart of the forest where the greatest trees grew. Then it pointed to the humans and made a questioning sound. "It's a test," Jin-woo realized. "More than that," Yuna said, watching the Silvani's expressions. "It's an invitation." That night, as they prepared to sleep in the Silvani Grove, surrounded by beings who had decided to trust them, Hyun-sik felt something he hadn't expected when they started this mission. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for something greater. The chance to bridge two completely different forms of life and create something new. Tomorrow, they would venture into the heart of the jungle. They would face whatever test the forest had prepared for them. But tonight they slept among friends. The morning mist drifted through the Silvani grove like ghostly fingers. Captain Hyun-sik woke to find Yunji sitting nearby, watching him with curious eyes. The young Silvani had been fascinated by the humans since their first meeting yesterday. "Good morning," Hyun-sik said softly. Yunji tilted its head and repeated the sounds, though they came out more like wind through leaves. The universal greeting seemed to translate well enough. The other humans were already awake and moving around the grove. Jinwoo practiced basic Silvani phrases with Woo-jin, though his attempts at their wind-like language sounded rough. Yun-ah sat with Gildong, examining various plants the ancient being showed her. Minho had somehow convinced several younger Silvani to teach him their communication methods. "How long have we been here?" Hyun-sik asked Jinwoo. "This is our third day on the planet. The Federation probably assumes we're dead by now." "Good. That gives us time to learn without interference." Woo-jin approached them, carrying what looked like fresh fruit growing from a living branch. It offered the food to Hyun-sik while speaking in its musical language. "It says Gildong wants to show us something important today," Minho translated. His ability to understand the Silvani continued to improve rapidly. They followed Gildong deeper into the jungle, along paths that seemed to form themselves as they walked. The ancient Silvani moved slowly but with purpose, touching trees and listening to responses the humans couldn't hear. The forest here was older than anything they had seen before. Trees stretched up so high their tops disappeared into perpetual mist. Their trunks were wide enough to house entire buildings. Vines hung down like natural highways, supporting entire ecosystems of smaller plants and animals. "Look at your feet," Yuna said softly. Hyun-sik looked down and gasped. The ground beneath them wasn't soil at all. It was a network of roots and fungal connections that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Every step they took sent ripples of light racing away in all directions. "It's a neural network," Yuna explained. "The entire forest floor is connected. Every tree, every plant, they're all talking to each other through this system." Gildong stopped beside a massive tree whose trunk showed spiral patterns in its bark. The ancient being placed both hands against the tree and began to hum in harmony with the forest's background music. The tree responded. Its bark began to change color, showing patterns of light that flowed up and down the trunk. Other trees nearby joined in, creating a cascade of luminescent communication that spread throughout the forest. "What's happening?" Jinwoo asked. "Gildong is introducing us to the forest itself," Minho said, his voice filled with wonder. Images began to form in the humans' minds. Not thoughts exactly, but impressions and emotions. They saw the forest as Gildong saw it, a single vast organism spanning the entire moon. Every leaf was a nerve ending, every root a blood vessel, every tree a neuron in an impossibly large brain. They felt the forest's curiosity about them, these strange creatures who walked on two legs and made tools from dead materials. The forest had encountered many species over the millennia, but none quite like humans. "It wants to understand how we think," Yuna said, "and it's willing to teach us how it thinks in return," Minho added. For the next several hours, Gildong and the other Silvani taught them the basics of forest communication. They learned to read the subtle color changes in tree bark that indicated mood and health. They discovered how to taste the air for chemical messages carried on the wind. Most importantly, they learned to listen. The forest was never quiet. Underneath the obvious sounds of birds and insects was a constant flow of information. Trees sharing nutrients with their neighbors, warning signals about dangerous weather, celebration songs when new life was born. The Silvani aren't separate from the forest, Yuna realized. They're part of it, like specialized cells in a larger organism. Woo-jin demonstrated this by placing its hand against a tree. Its bark-like skin actually merged with the tree's bark, creating a direct connection. Information flowed both ways. Wu Jin sharing its experiences with the tree sharing its accumulated knowledge with Wu Jin. That's how they knew about the other teams, Jin Wu said. The trees remembered everything. Yunji led them to a clearing where several young Silvani were tending to what looked like a garden. But as they got closer, the humans realized it was something much more sophisticated. It's a library, Minho breathed. Each plant in the garden contained memories. Touch a flowering vine and experience the migration patterns of flying creatures. Brush against a moss-covered rock and feel the rhythm of seasonal changes. Every species in the garden was a living book, holding centuries of accumulated knowledge. How do you preserve information in living systems? Yuna asked Yunji. The young Silvani showed her by touching a small tree. Images flashed through Yuna's mind, the tree's entire life history compressed into a few seconds. Birth from a seed, slow growth toward the light, seasons of abundance and scarcity, interactions with countless other living things. The memory is stored in the genetic structure itself, Yuna explained to the others, but it's not just instinct. It's actual recorded experience passed down through biological inheritance. They spent the day learning to access different types of stored information, weather patterns, animal behaviors, the effects of various chemicals on forest health. The Silvani had been building this biological database for thousands of years. In return, the humans shared their own knowledge. They drew star maps in the dirt, showing Gildong the location of Earth and other human colonies. They explained basic physics and chemistry using demonstrations with rocks and water. The Silvani were particularly fascinated by human tools. They had never developed technology in the traditional sense because the forest provided everything they needed. But they were intrigued by the concept of dead materials being shaped to serve specific purposes. Show them the knife, Hyun-sik suggested. Jinwoo reluctantly drew his combat knife and demonstrated its use by carefully trimming a piece of wood. The Silvani watched in amazement as dead metal cut through living material with precision. They don't understand the concept of deliberately killing materials to make tools, Minho translated after a lengthy conversation with Wu Jin. But they're not judging us for it, Yuna added. They're just curious about different ways of solving problems. As the day progressed, they learned more about what had happened to the previous teams. The Trilaxians had tried to scan everything with their advanced equipment. To the forest, this felt like an invasion, foreign entities trying to steal its memories without permission. The Vorthak had come with weapons, treating every living thing as a potential threat. The forest had responded to their aggression by activating its defense systems, plants that could entangle and dissolve organic matter, fungi that released spores capable of breaking down metal and electronics. The Kethmori had tried to hide their presence, using stealth technology and avoiding contact. But to a planet-wide organism, their attempts at invisibility were like trying to hide from your own nervous system. The forest could sense them on a level their technology couldn't block. All three teams made the same mistake, Hyun-sik realized. They treated the forest as an environment to overcome instead of a being to communicate with. But their consciousness is still here, Minho said. Gildong showed me. The forest absorbed their memories and personalities to preserve them. Could we talk to them? Jinwoo asked. Gildong considered this question for a long time. Finally, it led them to another part of the forest where the trees grew in strange configurations. Here, the neural network beneath their feet glowed more brightly, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with stored information. This is where the absorbed minds are kept, Wu Jin explained through gestures and the few words they now shared. Gildong touched one of the unusual trees and hummed a complex melody. The tree responded, its bark flowing like liquid until it formed a rough approximation of a Trilaxian face. The face spoke in the clicking language of its species. Minho couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Confusion, fear, and gradually dawning awareness. It remembers being absorbed, Minho said. It thought it was dying, but instead it became part of something larger. The tree face. asked questions in rapid Trilaxian. Gildong responded with its own musical language, apparently explaining what had happened. "It wants to know if its team is safe," Minho translated. Gildong gestured to other trees nearby. Each one formed faces representing members of the lost expedition teams. All were conscious, all were aware, but none were human anymore. They had become part of the forest's vast memory system. Could restored to their original forms? Yun-Ah asked. This question sparked a long discussion among the Silvani. Gildong consulted with several other ancient beings who emerged from the deeper forest. They debated in their wind-like language while the human team waited. Finally, Wu Jin turned to them with what might have been a sad expression. "Possible, but dangerous," Minho translated. "The process of separation might damage both the individuals, forest. They have become part of something larger than themselves." "Do they want to be separated?" Hyun-sik asked. Gildong posed this question to the tree faces. The responses were mixed. Some expressed desire to. The fourth morning on Verdania brought changes that Captain Hyun-sik could feel in his bones. The forest's background humming had shifted to a deeper tone, and the bioluminescent networks beneath their feet pulsed with more urgent rhythms. Gildong approached their sleeping area before dawn, moving with unusual purpose. The ancient Silvani's bark skin showed new patterns, spirals of silver that seemed to flow like liquid metal across its surface. "Today is the day," Wu Jin said, using the simple human words it had learned. "The day for what?" Jin Wu asked. Though his tone suggested he already suspected, Gildong placed one gnarled hand on the ground. The neural network beneath them flared to life, sending cascades of light racing away in all directions. Images formed in their minds, the heart of the forest, where ancient trees grew so large they seemed to touch the sky itself. "The consciousness wants to meet us," Minho said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The what?" Hyun-sik asked. "The forest's central mind. The place where all the neural networks connect. Gildong says it has been watching us since we arrived." Yuna knelt beside the glowing root system and touched it gently. Information flowed into her mind, not words or images, but pure knowledge. "It's like a biological computer," she explained. "But instead of circuits, it uses living neural networks. The consciousness of every creature that has ever been absorbed into the forest contributes to its awareness." They prepared for the journey. Quickly. The Silvani provided food, fruits that would sustain them for days, and water stored in living gourds that purified themselves. Yunji insisted on coming with them, despite Gildong's obvious reluctance. "Young ones are not usually permitted," Wu Jin explained. "But Yunji says the humans are its responsibility now." The path to the forest's heart was unlike anything they had walked before. The trees here were ancient beyond measure, their trunks showing growth rings that spoke of millennia. The canopy above was so thick that very little sunlight reached the ground, but the bioluminescent networks provided plenty of illumination. Every step they took was monitored. Hyun-sik could feel the forest's attention like a physical weight, not hostile, but intensely curious. They were being evaluated continuously. "What exactly is this test?" Jinwoo asked as they walked. Gildong communicated through a complex series of gestures and sounds. Minho listened carefully before translating. "We have to survive for 3 days in the deepest part of the forest. But there are rules. We cannot harm any living thing. We cannot take anything that is not freely given, and we cannot use any technology beyond simple tools." "Sounds like an extended camping trip," Jinwoo said. "There's more," Minho continued. "The forest will test our intentions. It will present us with challenges designed to reveal our true nature. If we pass, we become the first outside species ever granted full access to the forest's knowledge. And if we fail?" Yuna asked. "We join the other absorbed minds, conscious but no longer independent." They walked in silence for a while, processing this information. The stakes were clear. Success would make them ambassadors to an entirely new form of civilization. Failure would mean losing their humanity forever. The forest around them grew stranger as they approached its heart. Trees here had evolved into impossible shapes, spirals that twisted up toward the canopy, arches that formed natural bridges, living walls that pulsed with internal light. Everything was connected by the glowing neural network, creating a vast biological machine of incomprehensible complexity. "Look at that," Yuna whispered, pointing ahead. In a clearing before them stood the largest tree they had ever seen. Its trunk was easily 100 meters wide, its height disappearing into mist high above. The bark was covered in patterns that shifted and flowed like living text. Root systems spread out from its base like the arms of a massive octopus, each one thick enough to serve as a highway. "The heart tree," Gildong said in its wind-like language. As they approached, Hyun-sik felt something he had never experienced before. The tree wasn't just looking at him. It was looking into him. Every memory, every thought, every emotion was being gently examined by an intelligence vast beyond human comprehension. "Welcome," a voice said inside their minds. Not heard, but felt, like thoughts that weren't their own. "You are the consciousness?" Hyun-sik asked aloud. "I am one expression of it. I am the memory keeper, the judge, the voice of all who have joined the great conversation. You interest me, small walking ones." Images flashed through their minds, the arrival of the previous expedition teams, their failures, their absorption into the forest's memory banks. But also older memories. The first Silvani to bond with the trees thousands of years ago. The slow evolution of a planet-wide intelligence. The development of biological technologies that could store and process information in living systems. "You think differently than the others," the consciousness observed. "They came to take. You came to give." "We came to learn," Hyun-sik corrected. "Yes, and in learning, you gave the greatest gift of all, respect for what you did not understand. This is why you will be tested, not simply absorbed." Gildong gestured for them to continue deeper into the forest. The heart tree's influence faded gradually, but they could still feel its attention like warm sunlight on their backs. They made camp in a grove where the trees formed a natural circle. As night fell, the forest came alive around them in ways they had never experienced before. Every plant glowed with its own light. The air itself seemed to sparkle with floating spores that carried information between distant trees. "The test begins now," Woo-jin said, then retreated with Gildong to the edge of the clearing. The humans were alone in the heart of an alien forest, surrounded by intelligence that could easily destroy them if it chose to. "Well," Jin Woo said, "practically, I guess we should find food and water." But finding sustenance in the deep forest proved more challenging than expected. The fruits they had learned to recognize were absent here. The streams they found tasted strange, making them sick to their stomachs. Even the air seemed thinner, harder to breathe. "The forest is testing our resourcefulness," Yuna realized. "It's not making things easy for us." On the second day, they encountered their first real challenge. A massive creature emerged from the depths of the forest. Something like a bear crossed with a tree, its hide covered in bark-like plates and its claws made of living wood. The creature was clearly in pain. One of its wooden claws was broken and infected, leaking sap that glowed with unhealthy colors. It moved toward them with obvious hostile intent, driven by pain and fever. "Our weapons won't hurt it," Jin Woo observed, looking at their simple knives. "That bark armor is too thick." "We're not supposed to hurt it anyway," Yuna reminded him. "The test says we cannot harm any living thing." "But it's going to harm us if we don't do something," Minho pointed out. Hyun-sik studied the creature carefully. Its broken claw was clearly the source of its distress. Debris from one of the crashed alien ships had apparently lodged in the wound, preventing it from healing properly. "We help it," he decided. "Are you insane?" Jinwoo asked. "Look at it. It's not naturally aggressive, it's hurt and scared. This is part of the test. Do we respond to threats with violence, or do we look for other solutions?" Approaching the massive creature required all their courage. It snarled and swiped at them with its good claws, but Hyun-sik noticed that it wasn't really trying to hit them. It was warning them away, trying to protect them from its own pain-driven violence. "Easy," Yuna said softly, the way she might calm a frightened animal. "We want to help." She slowly drew her medical kit and showed it to the creature. The antiseptic and bandages were crude by galactic standards, but they were designed for treating biological injuries. The creature's eyes focused on the medical supplies with obvious intelligence. It stopped snarling and extended its injured claw toward them. Working together, they cleaned the infected wound and removed the alien metal that had been preventing it from healing. The creature remained perfectly still during the procedure, though tears of glowing sap leaked from its eyes. When they finished, the creature made a sound like wind through a pine forest, unmistakably grateful. It gently touched each human with its good claw, then disappeared back into the depths of the forest. "I think we passed that test," Jinwoo said. On the third day, they faced their final challenge. The consciousness itself spoke to them again. Not through the heart tree, but through every plant and animal in the forest. "You have shown compassion for creatures in pain. You have taken only what was freely given. You have harmed nothing, despite facing danger. But one test remains." The absorbed minds of the previous expedition teams appeared before them, not as tree faces this time, but as ghostly projections in the air. Trilaxians, Vorthak, and Kethmori, all looking exactly as they had in life. "Choose," the consciousness said. "We can restore one of these teams to their original forms. They will return to their bodies and rejoin their species, but the cost is high. Their knowledge and experiences, while part of our collective, will be lost forever. Choose which team deserves this gift." The humans looked at each other in dismay. How could they make such a choice? All three teams had families, friends, and lives they had been torn away from. "This is impossible," Minho said. "We can't decide who lives and who remains absorbed." "Then, don't," Yuna suggested suddenly. "Ask them." She stepped forward and addressed the ghostly figures directly. "What do you want?" "If..." The rescue shuttle descended through Verdania's atmosphere 3 weeks after the scheduled pickup time. Captain Day Wan of the Federation Search and Rescue Division expected to find crashed debris, alien remains, or at best some scattered equipment from the failed human mission. What he found instead would become legend throughout the galaxy. Captain Hyun-sik emerged from the jungle canopy at the head of a procession, unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Behind him walked Jinwoo, Yun-ah, and Minho, all clearly healthy and alert. But they were not alone. Dozens of Sylvani accompanied them, moving with graceful purpose through the forest edge. Wu Jin led the group, its bark skin showing new patterns of silver and gold that seemed to dance in the filtered sunlight. Yunji bounded alongside the humans like an excited child, carrying carefully wrapped gifts. Most shocking of all, members of the 3 previously lost expedition teams walked among them. Not all had chosen to return to their original forms, but those who did looked healthy and alert, despite having been declared dead weeks ago. "What in the name of the 7 moons?" Daewon muttered, watching through his shuttle's view screen. Commander Daeho, who had accompanied the rescue mission personally, stared in disbelief. His blue-green scales shifted through colors that indicated confusion, amazement, and grudging respect. "Establish contact," he ordered his communications officer. "Captain Hyun-sik, this is Commander Daeho. Please report your status." Hyun-sik's voice came through clearly, filled with barely contained excitement. "Commander, mission accomplished. We have established first contact with Verdania's indigenous species. Request permission to bring a diplomatic party aboard for transport to the station. Diplomatic party? Day-Ho repeated. Sir, we're about to make galactic history. The shuttle landing area had been cleared by the Silvani, who somehow convinced the usually hostile plant life to create a safe space for the alien craft. As the shuttle touched down, its crew prepared for the strangest pickup mission of their careers. The humans boarded first, carrying packs filled with carefully preserved samples and gifts. They looked like explorers returning from a successful expedition, not survivors of a deadly ordeal. Report, Day-Ho demanded as soon as they were aboard. Sir, Verdania isn't a hostile world. It's a living intelligence that was defending itself against perceived threats. The previous teams were absorbed rather than killed, and we've negotiated the release of those who chose to return. Living intelligence? Captain Day-Wan asked. The entire moon is one vast organism, sir. The trees, the plants, the root systems. They're all connected in a planetary neural network. The Silvani are its hands and voice. Wu Jin boarded the shuttle with careful dignity, moving slowly to avoid alarming the crew. Several other Silvani followed, along with Trilaxian scientist Keshlar and Vorthak warrior Thokmar, both looking remarkably healthy for beings who had been declared dead. How is this possible? Day-Ho asked Keshlar directly. Commander, we experienced something beyond our understanding of consciousness, the Trilaxian replied. Our individual minds were integrated into a collective intelligence spanning an entire world. Some of us chose to return to our original forms, others chose to remain part of something larger. And the humans made this possible? The humans proved that cooperation was possible. They showed the forest consciousness that not all outside species seek to dominate or exploit. They opened the door to choice. The journey back to Galactic, Survey Station Kepler 442b, took 6 hours. During that time, the shuttle crew got their first introduction to Silvani culture. Wu Jin demonstrated how it could communicate with the small plants in the shuttle's hydroponics bay, making them grow in specific patterns. Yunji showed them samples of living materials that could store and process information like biological computers. Most remarkably, Gildong had sent along a gift that would revolutionize galactic medicine. Fruits with healing properties that could regenerate damaged tissue and cure diseases that had plagued multiple species for centuries. These are worth more than all the rare metals we were hoping to mine, Yuna explained to the ship's medical officer. But they're freely given, with the understanding that we'll share the knowledge with all Federation species. When they docked, at the station, word had already spread throughout the galactic community. Representatives from a dozen species waited in the main docking bay, including Admiral Chen of the Federation Council and Ambassador Veltar of the Trilaxian High Command. The sight that greeted them defied every expectation. The humans emerged. First, followed by beings no one had ever seen before. The Silvani moved with organic grace, their bark skin catching the artificial lights in ways that seemed almost magical. Admiral Chen, Hyun-sik said formally. I present Wu Jin, first speaker for the Verdania Collective, and Gildong's representative for first contact with the Galactic Federation. Wu Jin stepped forward and spoke in its wind-like language. Minho translated immediately. Wu Jin says, the Verdania Collective greets the Federation with hope for peaceful cooperation and mutual learning. Admiral Chen, a career diplomat who had handled first contact with over 20 species, found himself at a loss for words. Captain, your mission was to investigate the disappearance of 3 expedition teams. Mission parameters expanded, sir. We discovered that the disappearances were defensive actions by a previously unknown intelligent species. We negotiated a peaceful resolution and established diplomatic relations. In 3 weeks? The Silvani are remarkably quick learners, sir, and they're genuinely interested in peaceful cooperation. Ambassador Veltar stepped forward, his compound eyes focused on the returned Trilaxian team members. Scientist Keshlar, explain what happened to your expedition. Ambassador, we encountered an intelligence beyond our comprehension. When we tried to scan and catalog the forest using our standard methods, it perceived us as a threat and absorbed our consciousness to neutralize the danger. But we were not harmed. We were integrated into something magnificent. And you chose to return? Some of us did. Others chose to remain part of the collective consciousness. Both choices were respected once the humans established that cooperation was possible. The formal debriefing lasted 18 hours. The humans described everything they had learned about Silvani culture, the forest's biological technology, and the planetary consciousness that governed Verdania. They presented samples of living materials that could revolutionize biotechnology, medicines that could cure previously incurable diseases, and most importantly, proof that intelligence could take forms the Federation had never imagined. But the real breakthrough came when Wu Jin made a formal proposal through Minho's translation. The Verdania Collective wishes to join the Galactic Federation as an associate member. We offer our biological technologies, our healing knowledge, and our unique perspective on environmental harmony. In return, we ask for protection from exploitation and the right to maintain our traditional ways of life. What role would humans play in this relationship? Admiral Chen asked. We request that humans serve as our primary ambassadors and cultural interpreters. They have proven they can understand our way of thinking and communicate our needs to other species. The request was unprecedented. Never before had an alien species specifically requested one Federation member to represent them to others. But the logic was clear. Humans had succeeded where other species had failed because they approached first contact differently. We don't seek to conquer or catalog, Hyunsik explained to the assembled representatives. We seek to understand and cooperate. The Silvani recognized this and responded accordingly. Over the following days, formal negotiations began. The Federation Council agreed to recognize Verdania as a protected world under human stewardship. In return, the Silvani would share their biological technologies and healing knowledge with all Federation species. The first human Silvani embassy was established on Verdania Prime, with Captain Hyun-sik serving as the first human ambassador to a living planet. Lieutenant Jin Woo became the head of security for diplomatic missions, using his survival skills to train other Federation personnel in environmental cooperation. Sergeant Yoon Ah led a joint research mission studying bio-integrated ecosystems, working directly with Gildong and other ancient Silvani to understand how biological and technological systems could work together instead of in opposition. Private Minho established the Galactic Communication Protocol for dealing with non-technological species, revolutionizing first contact procedures throughout known space. His ability to understand the Silvani made him the Federation's first specialist in biological communication systems, but perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The discovery of Verdania proved that intelligence could take forms the Federation had never considered. It challenged assumptions about technology, consciousness, and the relationship between species and their environments.